CTTB. Music Podcast.
Sing the theme tune.
I hear it. Just give me the mic, Scott, and I'm ready to sing to the world.
I didn't realise we did impressions.
Oh, no, that was really bad, wasn't it?
Although
Great impersonations, maybe.
yes, and they just fit in with the theme of the podcast. Hello, we are back again, and feeling quite lazy because the only good old days when we did 6 albums, then we went into 5 albums.
Yeah.
This time we're doing 4 albums.
Winning.
Those 4 albums are The Cure, Songs of a Lost World, Halsey, the Great Impersonator, Come Girl 8, The Eighth Cumming, and Orla Gartland, Everyone Needs a Hero. So, we will kick off in fine form, I'm sure, Peter, with the 14th album from The Cure. First since 413 Dream, a mere 16 years ago. The same year as the NME awarded the band the Godlike Genius title.
16. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
How are we feeling about the return of The Cure?
The return of The Cure has been much written about, I think, over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
They seem to have popped up everywhere, which is fabulous, obviously, because I just love Robert Smith's hair. It hasn't changed, except one thing.
And his ability to unapply. Yeah. There is a joy about how he's had to keep unapplying lipstick.
Yes. Yeah.
I will still make sure it doesn't actually go on my lips properly.
Exactly.
A mere 50 years after I started doing this.
I know. He started doing this years ago, and then obviously Heath Ledger took a cue with the Joker, and now he's outdoing him. And I love Batman. So here we go. Review of the album before I waffle on too much further. This is okay. Let's get straight into it. This is a surprisingly lush sounding album. I don't. Maybe that's not that surprising, but it is very lush sounding, and it's an album that's deep in expressive instrumentation. You feel like you're really getting your bang for your buck in terms of an album by The Cure after so long. It is, it sort of brings you in. I find it brings you in very early on, the opening couple of tracks in particular, and the album closer, End Song. They just go on, and then the lyrics kick in, and it carries on going on. And I know what I'm saying sounds like my normal critique of something that goes on a bit too long. This doesn't, I don't think.
Hold on for that.
Yeah, I'll hold that thought. Because having said that, I might have a caveat, but I'll save it. It feels very warm. It feels very enclosing and very, very, very enveloping, I should say. And then a fragile thing, which I think is the third track, brings things back to something more reminiscent of perhaps where you thought The Cure might be in terms of an album by The Cure. That sort of heavy bass, that sort of post-punk bass hanging over Robert Smith's mournful lyrics and vocals. I think he doesn't really do the vocal. He doesn't do the vocal until about track 3 or 4, where he sort of really sort of kicks in. And yet even that remains somehow upbeat, but in tempo at least, if not in spirit.
Yeah.
And then we hit the middle of the album and you get War Song, which is sonically more challenging, but I still think it's quite good. Quite brilliant, in fact. And it's that one I can imagine filling the stadium as the curtain falls at the start of the gig, and is immediately followed by Drone No Drone, which is clearly the standout sort of single or track that fills the stadium.
Yes.
In my analogy.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
And overall, it does what you expect of a Cure album after so many years, and it's great to have them back, obviously. I always think it's the more faster moving up tempo numbers, dare I say it, more cheerful numbers that perhaps bring them better or deliver them better. The production is on top. I mean, this sounds so expensively produced, and again, I mean that in a good way, but it does sound really good. And I think my caveat to all of that would be, whilst we have some very, very long, expansive tracks, it does feel long. And as an album, it does sort of feel like it goes on perhaps a little bit. And there isn't much to it. You know, it's only 8 or 9 tracks of the album, but it does feel a lot longer. That's my only critique, because actually there are tracks like I Am and Nothing Is Forever and As Ever I ever am.
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Which I really liked. They would be my highlights. Over to you.
Yeah, well, I found myself on second listen of this album, perhaps being unfair, but suddenly because this album has literally garnered 4 and 5 star reviews and universal acclaim across the board. There hasn't really been a bad word uttered about this record. And I
until now.
No, not necessarily. No. But I was, there was part of me thinking, if this was released by any other band that wasn't The Cure,
Yeah.
wouldn't there at least been some reviews that at least said, I know, but bit samey and bit self-indulgent.
Oh yeah.
And don't get me wrong. If everyone has the right to be self-indulgent, it's a band that have been together for almost 50 years. So you know, but the fact that no one's even saying that, I find quite odd. And also, it's because this is an album that has 8 tracks, and the opening track, you have to wait 3.5 minutes before Robert kicks in.
Yeah.
With "This is the end of every song we sing."
Yeah.
And there was part of me thinking, it's not really, is it? Because on this album, endless intros are the start of every song you sing.
Yeah.
Because every single song, I think the quickest start of song to vocal is just over a minute. Most of them are over 2 minutes. It's like they've forgotten how to start a song. It's just like, let's drone on before we actually get to the actual song. Which is not to say the actual songs are bad, or that the droning on bit is bad either.
No.
But I just kind of thought, no one's pulling them up on this, kind of going, sorry, why is there kind of 3.5 minutes before the vocal starts on this song? Why is there 2 minutes on virtually every other song before the thing starts? And I think, to your point, I think that's why it feels longer than it is.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because there's just a lot of kind of self-indulgent wanking at the start of every track, where it's like, let's do this, and then we'll get to the... It's like, even on the short track, there's a short track that's like 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
And 2 minutes of that is the instrumental bit before you get to the actual song as well. However, I really like this album.
I know. This is the thing, right?
Yeah. So I'm saying that because I'm actually pissed off with actual professional reviewers that no one has kind of at least pulled up that fact and kind of gone, I know it's the Cure and everything. However, sorry, can we just address that there are some elephants in the room here?
Yeah.
Robert Smith's vocals and his lyrics are
Just on point.
Are great as the author. He is a supreme lyricist and songwriter. Was back in their pop star days and has continued to be, even in their kind of latter, more indie rock phase, which has kind of gone on for the last 3 albums, I would say. And as you said, the sound, the kind of muddy bass and guitar sound that's coming through the production is just really great. Reeves Gabriel playing a bit guitar, so we can have that. Usually have the ping for Todd, we have the ping for Bowie. Really, really
It's
good.
time for a Gabriel ping.
Indeed. So yeah, I mean, it is a really strong comeback record, and I like it a lot. But I suppose because we do this as a kind of like hobby kind of thing, I'm just amazed that I haven't seen a single review that's kind of challenged anything about it in any kind of way, which I do find surprising, because I do think, had this album been, particularly because obviously the first track and last track have the 2 longest lead-ins.
They do.
Both great tracks, love them both. So if that had been top and tail, and the rest of them had been kind of coming in kind of like within the first minute and stuff, I think that would have had more punch. But yeah, but it's yeah. I'm picking faults where ultimately there aren't really, and everyone's going, "Oh, brilliant, they're back," blah blah. And I kind of agree. I did see that Robert Smith said recently that the band planned to release a follow-up album, hopefully next year, and also tour next year, and then a documentary, which I'm assuming will be a documentary to do with the tour and various other things, in 2028, and then retire.
Oh God.
So retire stroke break up in 29, which would be the 50th anniversary of the release of the debut album.
Oh, I see. Wow. Okay. Wow. Interesting.
But yeah, it will be if they actually keep to that kind of thing. But yeah, it's
I love a timeline.
yeah. Then again, they were meant to be releasing not this album, but an album a decade ago. So
Yeah.
and it didn't happen. So.
Wow.
But if you've got to this stage and you haven't managed to listen to this album, then you really should.
It's definitely worth a listen.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Moving on.
What's next?
Is the 5th album by Halsey.
Aye.
You may remember her from winning podcast awards on this very podcast, pretty much for the albums she's released that we've reviewed.
Every time.
Yeah.
Here she comes.
So for a bit of her album, we've reviewed her album Manic, and then If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, which was a follow-up album, which, as she's musically said, what she really enjoyed making and was very important to her making, because she made it with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, which went obviously sold fuck on copies compared to Manic, which like people going, okay, that's really nice you've done that thing, okay. So she's moved back to, I guess, safer ground with this album. It is her first album since she's been diagnosed with a T-cell disorder, which is similar to leukemia and lupus. So I'm wearing my T-shirt.
Oh my God!
Just so sometimes it is.
Scott's wearing the House Tribute T-shirt. It's never lupus. Those of you that remember the House TV series with Hugh Laurie will get that. Those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, good luck. So
it's basically a concept album of sorts, with each track inspired by artist or song. So such as PJ Harvey, Dolly, Bowie, Britney, Bruce, and all filtered through the lens of how Halsey would have sounded if she'd been an artist in the 70s, 80s and 90s. And this all coalesces around 3 versions of the song Letter to God, which is the same music but with different lyrics relating to where she would put herself mentally in 74, 83. Well, she's not because she wasn't born, but if she was going back,
If she was there, yeah.
how she would have thought in 74, 83.
I love that. I love that progression. Have you noticed the song progresses somewhat as well each time?
Yeah.
Which is it's really clever.
It's
amazing.
It's very clever. It's a good way of good way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's important to say, once I've said that the songs are inspired by people, that they're very rarely pastiches of the people or the songs. This is seen to be kind of like she's used them as the touching point to come into whatever track it is, which probably explains the eclectic mix of stuff that we've got. So example, Dog Years is inspired by PJ Harvey. But that also reminded me a lot of kind of indie rock of the late 80s and early 90s. Lyrically, unsurprisingly, still really dark.
Yeah.
Still lots of songs, funnily enough, although not funny enough, about past trauma, her parents, suicidal thoughts, self-worth, motherhood, trying to cope with her multitude of illnesses now as opposed to several of the illnesses that she'd covered up before. So even in just the opening 3 tracks, you have lines like, because quite frankly, to be alive, it shouldn't kill me every day the way it does. I wake up tired, I think I'm better off dead, and a mercy kill is what I seek. I didn't ask to live, but dying is up to me. So it's not exactly a laugh fest, has to be said. But it is the same brutal honesty that we lived and fell in love with on Manic and If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power. Musically, I'd say it's more mellow. I think the main leaning of the album is more towards the kind of acoustic piano based kind of pop stuff.
Definitely mellow.
Like on Panic Attack and The End, I Believe in Magic, Darwinism, stuff like that. But then you still have some other kind of side kind of swipes where you got the kind of pop punk of Ego, the proper rock of Lonely as the Muse, which I adore, the pure pop of Lucky, which unsurprisingly is inspired by Britney Spears, and you can feel that in the kind of like tone and thing of the song. And also in that track, lyrically, given that Chapel Roan has recently been in the news talking about, personal space and people thinking that just because they're fans, they kind of own everything she does. And
but we do.
That song really taps into that kind of feeling.
My
main quibble with the album is it's too long. Compared to the previous couple of records, I think I think Manic and If I Can't Have Love, I think were much tighter records and just hung together a bit better. This is a bit flabbier, but at the same time, this is still a really good record. And for me, she remains the benchmark for modern female-fronted pop rock.
I disagree on that final point. Whilst skipping to the end of my notes, whilst this is a long album, whilst it is quite dense as well.
Yes.
I think I texted you at one point saying, "Oh my god, I need to listen to this yet again." I actually don't,
because it is the longest album on the podcast.
Yeah, I compared to the Cure album, which is only 44 minutes. This fills its length, but I don't actually think it's too long at all.
It does still come in under an hour, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think maybe just over, but there we go. I mean, as you say, it's her first album since receiving that health diagnosis. It plays out in the number of characters that she's playing that are pointedly not her but are her, which is very Bowie, Ting, or even Ping. And I think, from the opening track,
I think Ego is inspired by Bowie.
Oh, definitely. I was about to say, from the opening track.
If you've seen the video, that'll make a lot more sense when she's.
Oh, I'm sure. The opening track is an arch in wit and irony as she imagines her own funeral being far from sold out. Possibly a reference to her previous album. And resurfaces again on Dog Years. She also does discuss and continues to touch on the weakness of empathy as a superpower right through this album. And whilst it's quite a soft, gentle sort of bring you into the album, immediately followed by Ego, which is a very powerful track, which and it's also a very pop-driven track as well. So she does that thing she's always done in terms of bringing the pop back to essentially what is quite dark topics. And I think that never really leaves. I mean, the album never really sinks into that deep despair you might expect of someone in her particular situation right now. But there's an acceptance of the despair. There's a personal loss. There's even a recognition in a couple of tracks of the guilt that she passes on to her children, in terms of an actual physical passing on, in terms of, oh my God, I've got this. Have you got it as well? Which, you know, every parent's nightmare, that you pass on something genetic that they can't deal with. I think there's a beautiful lyric about, I've passed this on because I am getting old, and you also will get old. That's the human condition that you pass on there.
But it is. I mean, that bit's quite sweet because obviously, as mentioned, because there's also quite a lot about, you know, there's quite a lot of suicidal stuff in there as well.
Yeah.
So the actual kind of like envisaging herself being older as well is very important in the context of that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, and she does absolutely acknowledge that she will also grow old, which is obviously great to hear. And even in its bleaker, quieter moments, the album remains strangely comforting. And I'm thinking of Darwinism at that point, which I think is one of the bleaker moments, but it still sort of wraps you in a hug. Still feels okay. There are moments that lift from the gloom. You mentioned Ego, I mentioned Ego. There's also Lucky.
Yeah.
And the Great Impersonation, which we mentioned right at the top of the podcast, which we alluded to. And I think in conclusion, I actually think this is probably one of her greatest albums of the 5. I put it ahead of the last album, which may surprise you.
Ooh, that does surprise me.
It's also counter to the rule that if you have 12 producers on an album, it sounds like an absolute mishmash of 12 producers. There's some sort of consistency to this album. I think it's in the songwriting. It definitely shifts in tone and musical style, but there's a deliberateness to that even as well.
Well, I think that's,
you know,
I think that's certainly helped by the setup of doing the 70s, 80s, 90s mindset thing. So therefore, you can kind of get away with things not having that consistent sound.
And it's not 12, but you know what I mean. It is many producers, as opposed to Trent Reznor, you know, which had a very consistent style throughout. But it might not be as immediately impactful as some of its predecessors. But actually, I think its density definitely rewards on repeated listen. And that's where I come to my conclusion that this is possibly her best album.
Ooh. Walter agrees. Yes. Yeah. Sarah's just gone downstairs. Walter's now barking. Okay. So now we go on to the one that everyone's going to be Googling.
Don't.
Yeah. Don't believe the hype. Be slightly more careful when you're Googling this one, perhaps.
What's this one?
So this band are called Come Girl 8.
Ah!
And their album is called The Eighth Cumming.
Is that spelt how I think it's spelt?
It is spelt as you think, yes. And this is a debut album for a band that, according to Wikipedia, are an American post-punk band and multimedia collective based in Manhattan, New York, founded in 2019 by Leda Fox, Veronica Villim, Abishag.
Is that how I think it's spelled?
Yeah, it is exactly that. Abishag Rodriguez and Chase Lombardo, also known as Chase Noel. Describe themselves as a sex-positive alien amoeba entity. They create works in the field of music, film, publishing, and fashion. Now, armed with that knowledge, you probably already have an idea of what you're going to get. Or,
well, half our listeners are thinking, well, I'm not listening to that. But this, mate, oh God, stop knocking the mic. Sorry if I keep knocking the mic. But you may be pleasantly surprised. I was not sure what to expect, given the appraisal you've just given there of the band.
Or their name.
Or their name.
Yes.
or their publicity. And I did actually show my wife Debs
I'm also dropping things.
a picture of the band, and she just looked at it and she said, "Well, they're brat," and rolled her eyes, which I thought was a good summing up. So I thought I'd throw that in. But seriously though, this is an album that actually kind of makes sense. It all sort of falls together and is rather enjoyable. It hangs together well. It moves along at pace.
I wrote surprisingly enjoyable.
It is. I've actually written at times surprisingly straightforward in terms of indie or post-punk. You think about tracks like Mercy or Simulation, and at other times when it gets more experimental, like Karma Police, no, not a cover, and UTI. Lyrically, of course, there's a lot there about self-discovery and self-love, both physically as well as emotionally. But actually, when you think about tracks like NY Times, which is very post-punk with that Joy Division hooky lick as well.
Yeah, or almost Joy Division New Order Cure.
Definitely.
Kind of bass thing. It's like when I was listening to Cure albums again.
Yeah.
The irony that we have randomly in an album later on in the podcast. Some kind of Cure-esque bass playing.
It's absolutely, and something new as well, which leans into that. It's actually quite a good album. So I would say, don't believe the hype that they generate themselves. Google very carefully and check this one out.
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. This is one of those things that I have to admit that I chose this album to review purely on the basis of the band name and album. Like I thought, okay, that's surely going to be fun if nothing else. And then I read the description of what they were and kind of thinking, oh my fucking god, this is going to be just dreadful. And bizarrely, it starts off kind of like manic, kind of early 80s dance mode kind of thing with Karma Police, where they're lyrically trying to find an air tag that's attached to something, and I'm thinking, Jesus, oh my god,
what's going on?
and I was fearing the worst of this media collective,
because that's what you expected, right?
That the opening track was exactly what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But then singer starts, which has a more laid back edge. I should say the whole album is, the album is set in the first couple of years of the 80s, essentially. It hooked me in with its catchiness, and what I mean by that comment about the 80s is when I got to the end of my first listen to this album, I just kind of thought, this is kind of like Lena Lovitch meets Spandau, Duran, Susie, New Order, Dollar, Ultravox, The Slits, and a few more people thrown in as well. In fact, Mercy, when it first came up, I was thinking Blancmange.
Oh wow!
And it was just like, what is this? It's just really, really weird. And it starts off cheesy, and then just it gets.
It finds a groove.
Much more sophisticated. There's like Hysteria, really love that. UTI is really fun. Stimulation, also fun. The song, also Stimulation, is also fun as well. As you said, you get to New York Winter and stuff like that. You get the kind of New Order-y, Cure kind of bass line, which comes in a couple of later tracks. And yeah, it's just all surprisingly enjoyable. You kind of think, no, this is not going to work. This is going to be quite shit. And actually, no, it's surprisingly worth checking out, particularly if you're a fan of the early 80s kind of music. Yeah,
definitely. It is. It's definitely worth checking out. Get past the sort of self-harming name in terms of what they're doing to their marketing, and and actually check this album out, because it's actually pretty solid.
Also, they're touring the UK next month, including playing the Underworld at Campton on the 5th of December.
Right.
Finally,
Nice.
we move on to Orla Gartland, Everybody Needs a Hero. This is the second album from this Irish singer-songwriter musician. Her debut in 2001 was Woman on the Internet, which apparently made it to number 10 on the UK album charts. This passed me by, but then again, like Come Girl, I wasn't really knowing what to expect from this record. And what I found was another pleasant surprise, to be honest. Having not heard of anything off her debut album, this sophomore album is a resounding success as far as I'm concerned. It has this opens with a slow, kind of sorrowful, stark piano track with no kind of accompaniment, complete with background noise. And immediately I kind of thought, we're on a Lana-esque kind of vibe here. And then suddenly we change gear for 35 minutes of what I think is very well-crafted indie pop rock.
Yeah.
Kicking off with the excellent duo of The Sound of Letting Go and Little Chaos, which is the song from the podcast that I've been humming most during the last week. It's an album that's about relationships or relationship, but not about a breakup per se. It's more about figuring out how to be in a relationship and be there for someone and be part of a collective relationship whilst maintaining your own identity. So we go on to songs about lying and talking with the voice in your head, like Backseat Driver, questioning how to retain your identity in the relationships I just mentioned, with Who I Am, and The Hit, which has that nice line of, now where do I start, where do you end? There's songs like Simple, which I quite like in the middle of the album, which is quite just basic kind of guitar based, which has that nice line. It's like a long fight, but it's like a long flight, but with good food. It's the right song for the right mood, which I think is something that resonates in this podcast. Elsewhere, there's a song with Declan McKenna, who we reviewed in the podcast, Late to the Party, which is quite fun. There's the ridiculously joyous foot tapping of Kiss Your Face Forever, which is featured in Heartstoppers Series 2. Musically, it has hints of Paula Cole, Annie Clark, St. Vincent, Billie Eilish, a few others. But I think ultimately you end the record thinking you know who Orla Gartland is and what she is. And on the evidence of this second album, I'd say what she is very good. And it's the only album, so going back to you last podcast, this is the only album in this podcast that I played again immediately after getting to the end. So I really like this album. And she will be touring the UK in April in 2005.
Nice. I had that experience at the last podcast. It's very nice. This was another album where I didn't know what to expect. I agree with you. And was also pleasantly surprised. It's the louder moments, like Sounds Like Letting Go, or it's the more sort of plodding, more sort of steady moments, indie moments like The Hit, or even the darker, quieter ones like Simple.
Yeah. I mean, The Hit could be on radio too.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean that's a nice
No.
thing. It's an album that has potentially, she's an artist that has that crossover appeal that she could be on radio too, and also be quite happily doing.
I'd say across the album, it delivers like a songbook like quality, which is really good, and quite easy to listen to. And again, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's not easy listening, but it's good. It's a good listen.
Also, the shortest album on the podcast.
Yes, it's an album of joyful guitar licks, pop sensibilities. Kiss Your Face Forever feels like a classic already. It just has that.
Yeah.
I'm going to hear this song again and again and again. And even I might forget who it is or where it's from, but I'll be like, oh, I know that song.
Yes.
And it also, I mean, for me, there's a lot of quieter, slower acoustic moments with nothing but strings. I mean, particularly towards the end of the album.
Yes.
Which are just lovely. And yet restrained at the same time. And Everybody Needs a Hero at the end of the album is just lush. I also like Late to the Party with Declan McKenna, and 3 Worlds Away with that sort of funky, kind of not funk but funky approach to.
Yeah, that's the kind of what you call it, the Annie Clark kind of St Vincent kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, no, this one also surprised me, and this has been a podcast of surprises, mostly positive.
Yes, which is always pleasant.
Yes.
Which actually, I was thinking that earlier on this afternoon, it makes it actually harder for me to decide what my album of the podcast is. And I'm actually tempted to go for Orla, simply because she's a new artist, rather than going for the safe bet of The Cure. Although obviously for you,
I wasn't going for that.
I was going to say, given that you've already said the Halsey album is possibly Halsey's best album,
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's probably where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it's definitely Halsey, but I want to give another shout out for Come Girl 8 because that will surprise people.
It definitely will. Yes.
Yeah.
Don't. That's the classic. Don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing, isn't it? Really. It's like
Exactly.
yes.
Yeah.
But don't judge a band by their name. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
There is more depth to it than you might expect.
Exactly. But it's definitely Halsey for me.
Until next time, which I believe will be
Don't say it.
Mariah time, Noddy Holder time.
All I Want for Christmas is the next podcast.
It's Christmas! Until then.
Bye.
The CTTB Music Podcast is a Vineland production.